Most of it was aimed at the European Parliament members itself. So it was less a speech to the European public, but because Ursula von der Leyen had several problems in the recent months to discipline the coalition that elected her in the first place, she applied pressure to them. And she did this by pointing out to all the dangers and on the global stage that make her leadership necessary.
When in trouble, organize a protest. That's sort of what people do in France. So now they have the fourth or the fifth prime minister in how many years?
Well, honestly, I find it very strange how the EU does politics. So they somehow commissioned Mario Draghi with doing this report at the EU Commission, and since then he's like a holy scripture, and he literally caused the problems that he now wants to fix.
So hello and welcome back to the MCC Brussels podcast. I'm Jacob Reynolds, Head of Policy here at MCC Brussels. Delighted to be back and kicking off a new season here in Brussels, and really excited to be joined by a special guest, Pieter Cleppe. People remember him, editor of Brussels Report, been a regular on our podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
And joining us again, our colleague Richard Schenk.
What a time to be alive.
So coming up on this week's podcast, we're going to take a look at Ursula von der Leyen's big so-called State of the Union speech. We're going to look at France, where the fall of another government has plunged Macron into yet another and perhaps even deeper crisis. And we're also going to take a look at all of the chatter surrounding Mario Draghi and whether he's the man to save Europe. So kicking off with von der Leyen, big set-piece speech in the European Parliament. One of the things that the EU likes to pretend it's a kind of real democracy by having these trappings of places with actual democracies like America, for example. But it was a notable speech for a number of reasons. The huge amount of time devoted to talking about places that are not Europe, whether that's Israel, Ukraine, and all the rest of it. The kind of more and more wishy-washy sounding initiatives and plenty of kind of scary sounding ones about regulating speech online, for example. But Richard, I know you were following this closely. What really struck you about the speech?
Well, most of it was aimed at the European Parliament members itself. So it was less a speech to the European public, but because Ursula von der Leyen had several problems in the recent months to discipline the coalition that elected her in the first place, she applied pressure to them. And she did this by pointing out to all the dangers and on the global stage that make her leadership necessary. So everybody who is speaking out against her is now basically indirectly labeled as a traitor, because you are backstabbing the heroic Ursula von der Leyen. And I understand this from a power play perspective, but it's led to the perception that if you look into this, like 2/3, almost 70% of the entire speech was dedicated to, as you said, places that are not Europe. Most of it was about Russia, about China, about Israel, with some nods to the Trump administration and so on. And I mean, it's nice because for the Brussels bubble, because these people care about this their role in the world and about their egos as well. But the general European public wanted answers to the problems that they have, so the cost of living crisis, about the economy, about jobs, and so on. And every time when it came down to these topics, actually Ursula von der Leyen just announced that she is going to fix something that the EU has broken in the first place. So she is fixing problems that are caused by herself, and this is a huge problem. This is going to put more and more pressure on the governing coalition that she elected her into the office, because they are not solving the Europeans' problems. They are going to lose election after election because of this, and on the long run, this is not going to make her position more powerful.
Yeah, and Peter, I mean, she kept talking about reuniting Europe, which was kind of code for ever more centralisation. She talked about democracy, which seems to mean more blocking democracy and being concerned about movements or populist kind of politicians across Europe. But what did you make of the speech?
Well, I was a bit annoyed by the analysis that she made on a number of issues, particularly the cost of energy. She said, well, the problem or the cost of the high energy cost in Europe is due to sort of the disappearance of and the over-reliance on Russian energy. Now, that's definitely an element in it, but obviously the main factor in the high energy cost in Europe is the European Commission itself, because they are they have been pushing for years for climate taxation, the emission trading scheme, which is effectively a European climate tax on CO2. And if you look at the total natural gas price in the United States, this is only, let's say, 20-25% of the one in Europe. But the part in Europe that is the EU climate tax is higher than the total American natural gas price. So, I mean, her institution is a major culprit in this enormously important problem that Europe has, which has contributed to divestment in the chemical industry, which is the industry of all industries. Same in Britain, which is still sort of following, for some reason, these suicidal energy policies. So I mean, that's really bothering me, because you cannot solve a problem if you're not sort of first making the correct analysis. And after that, also, she was, promoting the European electric vehicle. She made pronouncements like, everybody knows that the future of mobility is electric. Well, do we really? Frankly, I mean, most car experts that I talk to, and I'm not a car expert, but most do not believe in electric vehicles as the future. And yet the political class seems to be convinced that is the case.
Yeah, although we give her some credit for saying that she does want to support the auto industry, which nonetheless drew round of boos from the European parliamentary MEPs who are completely rabidly crazy on the green issue. But Richard, it wasn't just kind of more of the same from von der Leyen, although it kind of was, and as you say, lots of initiatives to fix things that the Commission had actually itself broken. But there was also lots of talk of new initiatives to so-called strengthen democracy and clamp down on speech and control social media. What did you make of these?
Well, if you look at the past, that when you were there, like three groups. One was that she tried to accommodate more the Social Democrats, the Liberals, and the Greens, because they were the most upset about her course in the recent months. So she actually proposed some new green measures, some European jobs law. So a bit of lip service to in this direction. I don't think that is really serious. This is more like just trying to calm this camp down. Then we had the second group was some kind of like what you mentioned, that we have. They notice that they are losing elections across Europe. So the fix is, instead of fixing policies, was actually to leash out against big tech. They always say that it's against big tech, but actually it's against the freedom of speech in Europe. The European citizens are most affected by this. About extending this European democracy shield, which is again in a disguise of foreign interference into elections, but if you look into the details, it's mostly about the domestic political debate that should be somehow tamed. And then also she is going to expand EU intervention in the media sphere. She spoke that legacy media has lost a lot of readership. This is something negative for the people currently in power, as she said. And so they want to expand EU spending on media to create, obviously she said democratic media, but obviously this media will also strengthen the European narrative and speak more into. So they are actually, they know that the policy solutions are not enough. They need to control the public opinion somehow. They need to regain the initiative. I think this is just desperation. And on the long run, this is not going to work. People have a very sensitive antenna if they are being told what to vote and how to think. And this is going to backfire.
Yeah, and Pieter, there was plenty of debate around the speech, around the kind of increasing pressure she's under in regards to Israel and Gaza and stuff. And she was saying that the Commission is going to take all these initiatives to start sanctioning Israel, etc. What did you make of some of the foreign policy?
It's such a complex topic, and you see that politicians in Europe are obsessively trying to, import this conflict here. I find this deeply troubling. I mean, wherever you stand, and it's obvious it's very, complex. I don't think the EU should mingle into foreign conflicts. And if you're concerned about the civilian deaths in Gaza, which is of course a justified concern, I do think you should reflect on the fact that when we had the Islamist attacks here almost 10 years ago in Europe, in Brussels and in Paris, France and Belgium were bombing Mosul, the Islamic State, and I haven't, seen many protests, in favor of the children of Mosul. So, I mean, the double standards are not just with Sudan versus Gaza. And apart from that, you can make, of course, justified criticism against the Israeli government, but the question is, do we really want, Western democracies sort of intervening into these incredibly complex, long-running sectarian conflicts in, pretty troubled parts of the world? I mean, haven't we learned from the war? The war in Iraq was a complete disaster. And I think, of course, politicians will be tempted to do that because there is a large Muslim electorate in Europe to address. But apart from that, the left is always, there when it comes to, promoting some good old-fashioned, Western self-hatred. So those things, come together. So I'm not surprised, but I think it's not a good development. And I think you see more and more people in Europe saying, look, I agree or I disagree with what Israel is doing in Gaza, but ultimately, this is not something that should affect the politics of Europe.
Yeah, and certainly not dominate it. Well, anyway, the one of the left leaders in the European Parliament has announced that they're going to put forward a motion of no confidence because von der Leyen hasn't done enough to address the so-called genocide. And but equally, the Patriots are also going to put forward a no confidence motion. It seems that von der Leyen has a rocky time ahead.
Yeah, so von der Leyen mentioned this whole Israel topic for one sole reason, because she thought it's opportune currently in the to broaden her power base, and the political left, not only the left group but also the Greens and Renew and Social Democrats asked for this to somehow show that we are doing something against the so-called genocide in Gaza. And so for Ursula von der Leyen, I thought, that's a very cheap price that you are asking me. So cutting back foreign aid to Israel, I mean, how much foreign aid does Israel receive from the EU? Like basically nothing. Or the EU doesn't even decide on which weapons are going to Israel. So it was very very cheap price for her to show the symbol politics against Israel. And the only thing that they could do is with the Israel Association Agreement, but she knows that this has no majority in the council, so she can just promise it anyway because she knows that the council is going to be the bad guy in the end of the day, anyways. So this was very cheap power play politics. It was not led by any kind of convincing ideology behind this. This is typical EPP, typical von der Leyen.
Yeah. So and Pieter, I know you've been following this so-called European democracy shield that's going to be almost the centerpiece of this new von der Leyen Commission or second von der Leyen Commission. What did we hear about that in her speech?
Well, yeah, this initiative and basically the overall crackdown on big tech that is ultimately, of course, as you say, a crackdown on free speech. I think, thankfully, at the moment we have a U.S. administration that is pushing back. But not just Trump, also in U.S. Congress, you have Jim Jordan that is deeply looking into the issue, not just to defend American companies, but because they are generally concerned about free speech of users. They absolutely want to avoid that Americans would get in trouble because of some, free speech hostile European legislation. And the good thing that we saw this summer is that some kind of appeasement deal was made with Trump on the trade war. But what many people haven't picked up is that the EU has actually made a number of concessions when it comes to green policies. CBAM, they will look at it. which is the climate tariff that is bothering America, but many trading partners, the deforestation directive, and the very expensive new bureaucracy that the EU is imposing on all kinds of companies that want to import in Europe. And the fact that they are exempting America is actually troubling the rest of the world, because Malaysia, other countries that have been reducing their, deforestation, they're like, okay, I mean, this is not fair. So this kind of initiatives by Trump, I do think they have some kind of indirect effect of completely undermining some of the more extreme European policies that we've seen in the last 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
That's hopeful.
Yeah, it's hopeful. Although I have to say, my reading of some of it was that they were von der Leyen was prepared to compromise on any trade-related issue, provided they got the right to regulate speech in Europe from European citizens. It was like she prepared to give up any industry as long as they kept that central right to control the narrative.
And we'll see about that, because they had to already water down some of their regulations, like deforestation. But it's not over for all these digital regulations.
Yeah.
The US political establishment is not gonna allow this just like that. I mean, it's crazy. They just gave a 3 billion fine on one of the big tech companies, which then again triggered Trump to threaten with new tariffs. Mm-hmm. So the two are interlinked, and I think Europe will have to accept that it just has gone way too far with all of this.
Yeah, we'll be following this closely. So moving on to France, it was another government that fell this week after a no confidence vote that was, again, an attempt to pass a budget in France, which has proved immensely unpopular and immensely difficult given the kind of makeup after the snap parliamentary election that Macron called. This has thrown both Macron politically into another crisis, but also open up a whole series of questions about France. People are talking about the kind of complete bankruptcy of France, needing to be bailed out. There's all sorts of talk of really serious crisis ahead for France. Pieter, what have you made of what's been going on in France?
Well, when in trouble, organize a protest. That's sort of what people do in France. So now they have the fourth or the fifth prime minister in how many years? I mean, the outgoing government has, tried to propose a number of ultimately very modest measures that would not have been enough to, get the budget deficit to 3%. We'll have to see now, but it looks like things will just continue. Moving in the wrong direction. We have indeed these angry protests. It's likely the government is going to fail to do much before the next presidential election. It looks like Macron is not going to step down, even if he completely failed to reform France. He talks a lot, but if you look at the French performance, it's actually worsened as compared to Italy. Certainly in terms of, debt to GDP, France has gone in the last 10 years, I think it was, from 90 to 120% to GDP, whereas the eurozone average has remained relatively constant as 90%. So this is a big failure for, reform-oriented presidents. And then, of course, on the background, we have the whole question with, Le Pen. The fact that she's not allowed to run on sort of, let's say, violations of the law that are standard political procedure in other countries, not to name my own. I would say that should be raising some eyebrows from a democratic perspective, wherever you stand, on the left or on the right. France is not in a good place. But I would say the upside is that, in theory, the state is cashing so much taxpayers' money. It's spending such enormous amounts of money that even a number of modest reforms should already, put the country back on the right track. But somehow there's no political willingness to do that.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll come back and talk about the financial situation a bit. But Richard, I wanted to get your thoughts on, as it were, the political crisis, because part of this is about the fact that there is no there's no stable majority in the parliament, number one. And number two, so much of this stems from the desperation of the French political class to keep the Rassemblement National out at any cost. And that's really what precipitated the whole crisis.
Yeah, so if you are familiar to the current political landscape in France, you know that there are three political camps. One is the extreme left, born out of the various communist movements in France that united with the remnants of social democracy. Then we have a centrist bloc, whose emblematic figure is Macron himself, but who is basically just representing the traditional political establishment of France. And then we have the right wing, led by Le Pen's and Badella's Front National. And what happened last summer, that the traditional establishment made a deal with the far left in order to be in power. So they did an electoral alliance, but this didn't lead to any kind of stable situation in the parliament, because the far left is keen on, out of ideological reasons, they want to expand the welfare state spending as much as possible, and also Macron, in order to buy the support of his supporters, who are mainly pensioners, he created a lot of small pension funds here and there, so that he can basically pay for their votes. And so this is why it's so hard to these two parties would have the majority together, but because they are basically blocked from their own political, because of their own political logic, they are blocked from actually cutting back spending. They are now pointing the finger to each other, who should cut back here and there, and obviously they want to keep Front National out of power. So it's a complete mess. It's a complete political deadlock. The only solution to this would be the elections of a new president if Macron would resign, but obviously he wouldn't do it, because then that would be a gamble for his political camp. And France is stuck. The government bonds and yields are rising constantly, and I don't see any end to this situation in the next two years.
Yeah. So, Pieter, I agree with Richard. Macron has to go, but also, what else does it say about just the general state of France, and also a crisis kind of brewing and being mirrored in lots of other major European economies in terms of spiraling debt?
Well, indeed, even if Macron would go, there is no political willingness or no sufficient political willingness to introduce some reforms to the welfare state, to pensions, so social security. And interestingly, in many other eurozone countries, you see a similar dynamic. And at the end of August, the Chancellor of Germany, Mr. Merz, he said that it's likely that we will no longer be able to sustain our welfare state with this kind of economic underpinning. Yeah. We're not rich enough anymore to continue with business of usual. And you see similar developments in other Western European countries. My own country, Belgium, which has the highest tax burden of the industrialized world, is currently finally looking at social security. This has been sort of ring-fenced for a very long time. Spending has doubled since the 1970s in terms of GDP, and we have some kind of a patchwork government, center-right people, socialist, and the socialist health minister, Mr. Frank van den Broeke. He's really fighting tooth and nail to prevent material reform, or to put it more in detail, he's actually trying to increase the control that the state has over healthcare, which triggered a massive doctors' strike at the beginning of July. So he's been accused of authoritarianism by the doctor unions, but also then hospitals were revolting against his proposals. And the interesting thing here is that you see that welfare states in Europe, when they're in a corner, they actually start showing some authoritarian tendencies. Mm-hmm. So many of these financial problems are the result of effective central planning gone wild. And then to respond to that, the government say, well, we need even more central planning. And thankfully, at least in Belgium, but I think in many other countries, you have the people in the field that do not accept this, that can already see the trouble brewing in the future. But I think at the end of the day, the only guarantee is some kind of a change of mind, because we no longer have the bond vigilantes. The UK still has the bond vigilantes, basically investors that say, well, I'd rather not put my savings into UK government debt anymore, at least not when Sir Keir and his friends are in charge, at least not with these policies. In the eurozone, that's no longer possible. You can no longer dump Belgian debt or French debt. Ultimately, the ECB, the European Central Bank, is behind all of them, and it's obvious that it's going to go very far in terms of eroding people's savings, just like in banana republics, to keep debt for governments cheap, so they can continue with business as usual, and make unsustainable promises. So when there's no longer the pressure from the markets, we may see then more central planning and more authoritarian policies to fix the problems.
Well, in France, the emblematic figures become that of Nicolas, the 30-year-old who's saddled with all of the social security obligations that the state has accumulated, and the outgoing prime minister even referenced the kind of inability of France to get to grips with this. So we would like to say, if Nicolas is watching, or his cognate's Nicholas, or in however we spell it out in other languages, we're very much on Team Nicholas here at MCC Brussels. Well, if Western European economies are kind of slightly spiraling out of control, and the European Commission is in crisis after crisis, there's one man, if you believe the mainstream European presses, who can come and save us all, and that's Mario Draghi. So repeatedly, ever since the famous Draghi report, which von der Leyen has invested so much political capital in, and especially over the last couple of weeks, we had the reappearance of Super Mario, who's apparently going to save us by implementing all the reforms that are needed across Europe. I'm, as you can tell, very skeptical that Mario Draghi is the man to save Europe. But Richard, what have you made of this kind of strange, repeated resurrection of Mario Draghi?
Well, honestly, I find it very strange how the EU does politics. So they somehow commissioned Mario Draghi with doing this report, and the EU Commission, and since then he is kind of quoted like a holy scripture. Every time there is a debate about European economy, his report is kind of like the gold standard. And this is a master class in how you narrow down the public discourse into to how you control discourse about policy options. So we are actually, even before a formal procedure has begun, we are already narrowed down to Draghi's report, and we can just say how much we want to implement from this 1,000-page report, or how much we are not allowed to. Great. And especially if you look at Draghi himself, I mean, he was at the helm of European monetary policy for 15 years, and then he was Italian prime minister. So he literally caused the problems that he now wants to fix. So one of his, I really like that he's so preoccupied with European banking and digital euro and whatever. This was the man who introduced quantitative easing on a large scale to the eurozone, who made housing more expensive, who drove down interest rates so that the banks suffer to make money on a traditional way, that you lend out money to investors, who then actually make money, then pay the interest rates so that the money this completely broke down. Banks completely shifted into to financial products of interesting qualities, to put it mildly, and to speculation to survive in this low interest rate environment. So he caused a lot of his problems. Then, as an Italian prime minister, he was kind of like the governor of the European Commission at his home, who implemented this COVID fund that basically was just a straw fire that didn't cause an Italian economic miracle at all. And now he's back, and now he's supposed to be kind of like the messiah of European economic policy. It's I don't even know what to say about this. I don't know why the national governments and the European Parliament are so expedient to speak up against Draghi's leadership. Who elected this man to be in charge of European economic policy?
Yeah, well, Peter, I mean, one obvious answer is that he preaches all the things that they would love to do. So he keeps talking about the need for even more EU centralisation and makes the right noises on tech and is, it's for some reason regarded as a competent figure in kind of contrast to flailing around Ursula von der Leyen.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at his history, he does not deserve his stature. He has been responsible for providing a sleeping pill to European welfare states to enable them to avoid reforms, so they can just, go on with business as usual. They don't have to care about economic growth. That would then result in tax revenue because the ECB is standing behind them for their financing. So, with such a horrible track record, you would indeed wonder why anybody would ask him for advice. But of course, Ursula von der Leyen did so. And then he came with some kind of predictable recipe of, more jointly issued European debt. Now, to be fair, he also suggested scrapping some regulations, or at least he was critical to, regulations like the GDPR, providing some data of how it has badly crippled European startups. But you don't hear anything about that part anymore. Now, supposedly, the solution is even more joint debt. And then if you look at, let's say, an important precedent, the next generation EU exercise, the recovery fund, and if you, you don't listen to Eurosceptic think tanks, but you just listen to what the European Court of Auditors has said about this fund. I mean, it's just a running scandal, basically. So much, unclarity on who has actually received the money. We have already recorded, investigations, of course, in Italy, but also in many other countries with, misspending and fraud and corruption. So you would, I would think that if somebody supports jointly issued European debt, at the very least, you would expect that this person would then explain why it will not be the horrendous failure that we have seen with the recovery fund. But of course, they never do that. They say, "Oh, we need more of this," and I don't think in the in serious discussions in Europe, people that generally look at, okay, how do we strengthen the European economy? I think few people are actually saying, "Oh, we need more debt," or we need more European debt. No, they're always talking about the welfare state. We have to activate people, so the economy is more dynamic. We have to open up the internal market, so we're not protectionist. And so instead of complaining about Trump, we may actually do something about it ourselves. We should not completely regulate digital innovation to death. So those are the kind of recipes that you hear. It's not rocket science at the end of the day. But like as we discussed earlier, there's a tendency to have more control, to control speech, that even if it comes at the cost of innovation and a better life for Europeans, they still that's the road they want to take.
Yeah, well, it seems that from all the issues we discussed this week, there's definitely a common theme, which is that with their backs against the wall, the kind of European establishment are going for ever more restrictive policies, and rather than recognizing some of the failures of the track record of European elites, it's all about clamping down on the ability of people to criticize or to organize or to vote and act democratically against this. This, of course, is stuff we're going to be following very closely this season at MCC Brussels. We've got a slew of great reports coming up, which we'll be delighted to share with you. But for now, thanks for joining the MCC Brussels podcast. If you enjoyed it, make sure you like and subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. But for now, leaves me to say thanks so much, Pieter, for joining us.
Thank you.
Richard, thanks for coming back.
It's been a pleasure.